There are moments that change a life forever. This is a story about one of them. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Ilara rubbed the sleep from her eyes, her feet finding the cold floor of the tiny apartment before her mind had fully woken. From the makeshift crib beside her bed, little Leo slept peacefully, his tiny fists clenched in a silent dream. At 22, Ilara carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, a burden she had accepted the moment her son was born. Her life revolved around a singular purpose, providing for Leo. Her job as a housekeeper in the grand mansion of Julian Croft, a formidable real estate mogul, was her lifeline. It was demanding work, but she poured every ounce of her energy into it, knowing it was the only thing standing between her small family and the harsh realities of the world. "Good morning, my love," she whispered, planting a soft kiss on her son's warm forehead. Leo stirred, but didn't wake. Ilara moved quietly, her morning routine a well-practiced dance of efficiency. As she prepared a bottle for later, her thoughts drifted to Mrs. Gable, the elderly neighbor who had become her saving grace. Mrs. Gable, a woman with a heart as warm as her smile, cared for Leo every morning without asking for a single dollar in return. But that Tuesday morning, her call had sent a jolt of panic through Ilara. A fever and body aches meant she couldn't risk passing anything to the child. With no one else to turn to, and the fear of losing her job a constant shadow, Ilara made a difficult decision. She would take Leo with her. Mr. Croft was away on business, not due back for 2 more days. It was a risk, but one she had to take. "It's going to be okay, my sweet boy," she said, looking down at Leo in his stroller. "Mommy has to work, and you're going to be a perfect little gentleman." Leo babbled in response, a wide smile revealing 2 new teeth. The mansion was as imposing as ever, a silent monument to a life of wealth Ilara could hardly imagine. Her employer, Julian Croft, was an enigma. A man who preferred the solitude of his vast home. His interactions with staff were always brief, formal, and distant. He was a man of impeccable suits and a gaze that seemed to hold a deep, unseen sorrow. Ilara set her son up in a safe corner of the sprawling kitchen with a few of his favorite toys and began her work. The morning passed smoothly, the house filled only with the quiet hum of her cleaning. But in the early afternoon, the sound of a key in the main door sent a wave of ice through her veins. He was back early. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she rushed to check on Leo, but the corner where she'd left him was empty. Panic seized her. "Leo, Leo, where are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Then she heard it, a sound so foreign in that silent house that it stopped her cold. It was a laugh, not Leo's, but a man's, a genuine, warm laugh that she had never heard before. She followed the sound to the main living room and froze in the doorway, unable to believe the scene before her. There, on the polished floor, amidst opulent furniture, sat Julian Croft, his tailored suit jacket unbuttoned, his tie askew. He was making funny faces at Leo, who was shrieking with delighted giggles. The baby had managed to grab the end of Julian's expensive silk tie and was waving it like a trophy. "So, you like my tie, do you?" Julian was saying, his voice stripped of its usual formality. "It's a rather expensive toy, but for you, I'll make an exception." Leo let out another peal of laughter, trying to pull himself up, using the man's leg for support. For a long moment, Ilara could only stare, watching the cold, distant man she knew dissolve into someone else entirely. Then Julian looked up, and his eyes met hers. In that shared glance, Ilara saw something new in his dark eyes, a softness, a flicker of light in the usual shadows. "Mr. Croft, I can explain," she stammered, rushing forward to scoop Leo into her arms. "There's no need to explain." "Not yet," he said, rising to his feet and straightening his suit. "First, tell me, is this little gentleman yours?" "Yes, sir. I know I shouldn't have brought him, but—" "What's his name?" he interrupted, his gaze fixed on the child. She hesitated, her fear returning. "Leo, sir." A fleeting emotion crossed Julian's face, too quick for her to decipher. "Leo," he repeated, his voice softer now. "It's a beautiful name." He listened patiently as she explained about her sick neighbor, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Ilara," he said gently, cutting off her panicked apology. "Breathe," she surprised by his calm tone. "In the year you've worked for me, have you ever given me a reason to complain?" "No, sir. I hope not." "Then why would you assume I'd fire you over an emergency?" He looked at Leo, now hiding shyly in his mother's arms. "Besides, he's remarkably well-behaved. He must have been in here for 15 minutes before I arrived. Not a cry, not a broken vase, just a very determined attempt to steal my tie." Leo, having recovered his courage, was now peering at Julian with wide, curious eyes. "May I?" Julian asked, holding out his arms. Ilara hesitated for only a second before carefully passing her son to him. "Hello again, young Leo," Julian said, and the baby immediately broke into a smile. Julian held the child with a surprising confidence, his usual stern expression replaced by one of genuine warmth. "Listen, Ilara," he said, turning back to her. "I understand that unforeseen things happen. If your neighbor needs a few more days to recover, you can bring him again. This house is far too big for one person. A little life in these halls won't do any harm." Ilara was speechless. This was the last thing she had expected. "It's not charity," Julian added, as if reading her mind. "It's practical. You work better when you're not worried, and I need my house kept in order." But Ilara sensed there was more to it than just practicality. There was a deep-seated melancholy in his voice that hinted at a story she didn't know. The following days established a new, unbelievable routine. Ilara would arrive with Leo, and Julian, who now worked from home more often, would always find time to interact with the boy. He bought a box of age-appropriate toys, his excuses always practical, but his eyes told a different story. The formal barrier between employer and employee began to crumble, replaced by something warmer, more personal. One afternoon, as Leo napped, Julian found Ilara in the kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" he began. "Were you always this strong?" The question was unexpected. "I don't know about strong," she replied honestly. "I just do what has to be done for Leo. He's my world." "And his father?" The question was quiet, but it hung in the air. "He wasn't ready for the responsibility," she said simply. "He's not in part of our lives." Julian nodded, a look of understanding on his face. "You're a remarkable mother, Ilara." Then a thought struck her. "And you, sir? Why are you always alone in this huge house?" A shadow passed over his features. "Let's just say this house used to be full of life," he said quietly. "It's been a long time since I've heard a child's laughter here." The quiet moments grew, filled with shared conversations that slowly unveiled the people behind their respective roles. Ilara learned about Julian's dreams before business took over his life, and she shared her own forgotten ambition of becoming a teacher. A fragile connection was being woven between them, a thread of shared loneliness and unexpected companionship. But with this new closeness came a new kind of fear. Her friend, Maria, who worked in another home in the neighborhood, planted a seed of doubt. "Be careful, Ilara," she warned one afternoon. "A rich, single man taking such an interest in your child. I've heard stories. Sometimes they have other motives." Maria spoke of men who, unable to have children of their own, would try to convince vulnerable mothers to give up their babies. The idea was monstrous, preposterous, yet it lodged itself in Ilara's mind like a splinter. She started to watch Julian more closely, second-guessing his every kindness. Was the health plan he offered for Leo a gesture of care or a strategic move? Was his talk of looking into local schools a sign of concern or of a man making plans? The final, terrifying piece of evidence came one afternoon when Julian was out. A door at the end of the upstairs hall, a door that was always kept locked, was slightly ajar. Curiosity overriding her better judgment, Ilara pushed it open. What she saw made the blood drain from her face. It was a nursery, perfectly decorated. A beautiful wooden crib, shelves of toys, and walls painted with gentle forest animals. And there, above the crib, in large, custom-made letters, was the name, Leo. The world tilted on its axis. Fatima was right. He had been planning this all along. The room was a trap, a gilded cage waiting for her son. It was all a lie, the kindness, the shared laughter, the budding affection. It was all a twisted manipulation to steal her child. Shaking with a mixture of terror and betrayal, she grabbed a sleeping Leo, scribbled a hasty resignation note, left her keys on the counter, and fled. She ignored the incessant ringing of her phone, deleting Julian's texts. Without reading them, she had to protect her son. The following weeks were a living nightmare. Leo, confused and missing the man he had come to adore, was inconsolable. He would cry for Juju, his name for Julian, and look for him around every corner. Ilara's savings dwindled, and the search for a new job was fruitless. Desperation began to set in. 3 weeks after she had run, she saw his car parked outside her apartment building. Julian was leaning against it, looking thinner, his face etched with exhaustion. When he saw her, he straightened up, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. "Ilara," he said, his voice hoarse, "please just give me 5 minutes to explain." Leo, seeing him, let out a joyful cry. "Juju!" he yelled, reaching his little arms out. The sight shattered what little composure Ilara had left. Hesitantly, she allowed Julian to take the boy, who immediately clung to him as if he were a lifeline. "You think I want to take him from you," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's why you left, isn't it? Because of the room. What other explanation is there?" she shot back, her voice trembling. "There is an explanation," he said, his gaze dropping to the child in his arms. "One I should have given you a long time ago. 5 years ago I was married. My wife, Isabel. We were expecting our first child. A boy." He took a shaky breath. "We had decided to name him Leo." The world fell away. "We decorated his room just like the one you saw," he continued, tears now streaming down his face. "We were so happy, but there was a car accident. Isabel, she and our son, I lost them both on the same day." The story poured out of him, a torrent of grief held back for 5 long years. The locked room was a shrine to a life that never was. When Ilara and her Leo came into his life, it was like the sun breaking through the darkest clouds. He had secretly started restoring the room, not as a plan, but as an act of hope, a way to imagine a future again. He was afraid to tell her, scared she would think he was trying to replace the son he lost. As he spoke, Ilara's suspicion and anger melted away, replaced by a wave of profound compassion and guilt. It was never a plot. It was the desperate, clumsy act of a man trying to heal a broken heart. Leo, nestled in Julian's arms, looked from him to his mother and said, "Juju, stay." In that moment, Ilara knew. She looked at the man who had been so broken and the child who had helped him. "Feel whole again?" "Yes, my love," she whispered, her own tears falling freely. "I think he's going to stay." They started over, slowly, building a foundation of trust and honesty. 2 months later, Ilara and Leo moved into the mansion. Together they redecorated the nursery, packing away the painful memories of the past and filling it with the bright promise of a new future. A year later, they were married, and Julian officially adopted the little boy who had taught him how to love again. They had found each other through shared sorrow, but they built a family on the unshakable ground of a second chance, proving that the most beautiful things can grow from the most broken places. Thank you for watching. May this story remind you that hope can be found in the most unexpected places. Like, share, and stay tuned for more.